that piece of legislation is cruel. And so they need to really make sure that that we don't go into default. And that's what they're asking to do. They're asking to hold our economy hostage and go into default. I think the pool has to gather. Oh, it's open press. Okay. All right. Well, I guess you guys can go gather if you choose to do.
Real quick, the president's been under some calls to now sit down with House Speaker Kevin McCarthy now that he has released his outlines of his plan on the debt limit. Why is now the time for the president to actually speak to the speaker and begin substantive negotiations?
So here's the thing. Zeke, look, we've been very clear. We're not going to negotiate over avoiding default. We've been very clear about that. The administration is going to have a conversation with leaders over the budget, over the spending cuts. We've been very clear about that, and we have said that from the beginning of this process. That look, we'll have that conversation. But when it comes to default, when it comes to their constitutional duty, that is something that they can do today. They can actually deal with something that would be devastating if they didn't take action, right? Now, when it comes to what we have seen them put forward, 22% cut on education, on veterans, on Meals on Wheels, on food safety, on law enforcement, all of those things are devastating to workers, seniors, to our children, to working families. And clearly they showed us what their value were. But what they have done is they have put those two things together, the debt ceiling and spending cuts. And we have always been very clear, Zeke. We have been very, very clear. We are not going to negotiate when it comes to the full faith and credit of this nation. And they are holding that hostage currently. They're holding the economy hostage. And so, look, they have to, we're not negotiating over that, and they have to avoid default. It's very clear. It's very clear. They need to make sure that we're not put in a situation where our economy could be put at risk. And again, been very clear about that. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, thanks, Karine. I want to follow up on what Zeke asked there. Senator Klobuchar on CNN yesterday said that President Biden should sit down and negotiate with the speaker on the budget, but also made clear that the spending cuts and should not be tied to the debt ceiling. And so would President Biden sit down with McCarthy to debate, to negotiate their different budget proposals, or what is the position?
So I want to be very clear here. The House Republicans' position is unless the president and the Senate agree to their entire agenda, that they're going to default and crash the economy, and that is dangerous. That is something that we're going to continue to call out, and it is unreasonable to do. We have been very clear. There will not be any negotiation around the debt ceiling, right? This is something that is their constitutional duty to do. They've done it 3 times. You've heard me say it over and over again. They did it 3 times in the last administration, and they should do it now. And look, every Republican that votes for this bill that Speaker McCarthy and MAGA Republicans have put forth, they're voting for cutting costs on veterans. They're voting for cutting costs on education. I just laid out at the top of the briefing what that would mean. 60,000. I mentioned 60,000 teachers. I mentioned how many kids it would affect. And so that's what they would be voting for, against those things that American families need. And we're talking about programs that they need to meet ends meet. And so we've been very, very clear. It is unreasonable to put forth what they did last week. It is cruel. That piece of legislation is cruel. And so they need to really make sure that we don't go into default. And that's what they're asking to do. They're asking to hold our economy hostage and go into default. And that's something that we're going to continue to call out.
Now, last week you didn't seem to rule out the possibility, though, of President Biden sitting down with McCarthy at some point. Is that something you're open to?
So look, again, House Republicans must avoid default. Been very clear. And that is within their power to do at any moment. That is within their power to do at any moment. And so that's what we're expecting them to see.